And we are live with Rashad Turner on Twitter, known as Rashad Republic. He is the founder and the president, the leader, executive director of the Minnesota Parents Union. He's also a father, a freedom fighter, an educator, a high quality education advocate, and probably one of the most notable effective activists in the Twin Cities, especially when it comes to issues of civil rights, justice, and education. Rashad, my brother, good morning. Thank you for joining.
Citizen,
you're back, man.
I'm with you.
It's been a long time. It's been a while since we've had this kind of conversation with my previous podcast, but it's nice to have you back. So listen, years ago, when I was on a school board, this is like the way I start many sentences on this show. When I was on a school board, it's kind of like my band camp, back, one time in band camp, I remember thinking to myself that there is a very strong political system that protects and defends the interest of teachers and principals and school boards. There are all these associations that go up to the state capitol together. The School Boards Association, the teachers unions, the principals unions, the superintendents even come together and have their own lobbying interests up at the state capitol. And if you spend any time at our state capitol in Minnesota, what you will find is they walk strongly together and they strong arm politicians to kill bills in the middle of the night, to not pass anything that they don't want passed. And the one group of people that doesn't have somebody fighting ruthlessly for their interests are families, parents, and students. They don't have a union. And I've said this for years from way back then. They don't have anybody walking the halls fighting on their behalf. But that's not true anymore. Now we have a Minnesota Parents Union. Enter Rashad Turner in the Parents Union. So tell me, what is the foundational basis for why you started this? Why did you think that it was necessary to start a union for parents, for families?
Well, I think, Chris, and first of all, good morning, everybody. It has been a minute since I've been here with the Citizens. I'm glad to be here. And shout out to my Minnesota Parent Union team, holding it down, getting things done. Chris, I think you listed out some points that were on my mind, on the mind of my former executive director, Al Fan, who was the executive director at Minnesota Comeback. But you laid it out, right? And I do spend a decent amount of time at the Capitol, decent amount of time speaking to senators, speaking to representatives. And the one thing that they all say, regardless, Democrat, Republicans, they all say that parents and students need representation at the Capitol. And that's a lot of the conversations that I have there. And when you think about, education, Chris, you laid this out, right? Principals, they have their own thing. Right. Teachers have someone looking out for them. But when it comes to families, especially families of color, right? Chris, you were on that Minneapolis school board. So, especially in Minneapolis, parents have power. But what we're used to seeing is a bunch of wealthy, white, English speaking families, usually white women that come to the board meetings and control everything, right? And it's like, I'm tired of that. A lot of folks are tired of that. And when we thought of Minnesota Parent Union, right, we knew we needed something strong, something that was going to sort of focus on moving the needle. And one of the big things that came up, and I say this a lot of times to folks, in Minnesota, there's been a bunch of efforts, right? Many of efforts to close the opportunity gap, close the achievement gap, whatever you want to call it. And they've all failed, right? And good intention folks, well-meaning, all of that. But that they were trying to do to us rather than with us, right? Do for us because, us poor old Black and brown folks, we don't know anything, right? What do Native American parents know, right? So they tried to do to or for, and that's something that Minnesota Parent Union is changing, right? Mm-hmm. I appreciate, the shout out you gave me as far as being an activist, strong, effective, but Minnesota Parent Union, it's about having parents' backs, doing this together, leading with families, right? Being great listeners, because I think that, that's the main thing that we do at Minnesota Parent Union. We listen, right? Whether it is helping families find great schools to get into, closing down bad schools, some of the policies that we advocate for, it all comes from listening. Right? So I think that, it's time to change the game. Shout out to my sister, Gwen Samuel, out in Connecticut, dealing with the system out there. But I had a great conversation.
Another parent union. Gwen Samuels, who's been doing it for years.
Right. I had a great conversation with Gwen. She gave me some game, and we launched this thing. And I'll say, I wouldn't have picked to start anything, I guess, in a pandemic. But because of the team we have and because of the need here in Minnesota, we're off to a great start.
All those groups that I named, the teachers union, this school board association, the group that supports superintendents with their political interests at the Capitol, all of them will say, we are, fighting for families and for students. Like, that's what we do. That's, so they would almost be incredulous. Like, why would we need, and we have a PTA, we have a PTA association.
Who's in that though, right? Who's going to those?
I mean, that's my point that I want to ask you about is like, what would be your response to all of those different groups who say we're in the business of defending the interest of children?
I would say to those folks and folks watching, right, when you think about the business, okay, and I've been practicing saying this word, my daughter's been helping me, but teachers unions have a fiduciary responsibility to teachers, right? Their main responsibility has to be what is best for teachers. And as we see in some of the policies, such as the Page Amendment here, such as opportunity scholarships, anything policy-wise that is focused, like truly focused on children, focused on our children, they say no. So I think that, that they're good at pulling the wool over people's eyes. They're good at showing up to the protests with their signs, making us feel like they're down for the cause, right? Making us feel like they want what's best for our children. But it's like thinking of business, they can't, right? When what's best for our children goes against who they're responsible for, that they're going to stick with teachers. And that's been shown time and time again throughout history. I mean, why do we even, I don't want to dig too deep into this, but it's like, why do we even have teachers unions, right? How did those teachers unions start? Why did they start, right? And again, I hate to qualify things, I guess, when I say them, but I want to be clear on this piece right here. Unions, like we need unions to focus on benefits, focus on wages, right? We don't need teachers unions getting in the way of our babies being able to read, right? That should not be what they're here for.
I mean, do we really need teachers unions? I mean, it's a provocative question no one's going to ask, but I'm going to ask it. Teachers unions are private organizations that have undue influence on the democratic process. Because they bundle their money together and pool their money, they can override the will of the local electorate. They oftentimes run slates of school board candidates who eventually sit at the table that negotiates their contract with themselves. This would be like stocking the EPA with Monsanto employees, right?
Yes.
So it really, like, I know that we're supposed to genuflect. When we have these conversations, we're supposed to genuflect and say, I love teachers and unions, but let me make this case mildly. But I don't know that I love unions necessarily if they do what I just said. Public jobs are meant for the public. Public employment is about the public. Public servants are supposed to serve the public. So why should they be able to bundle their money and override the local democratic process over the objections of the families and the parents with things around like seniority, hiring and firing, how teachers end up in the classroom, how they'll be evaluated, what they'll be paid? Why should they have a private organization that can override you and me as parents and voters and citizens and taxpayers? Because you and I don't pay an insignificant amount of taxes.
No.
Anyways,
you're trying to get me in trouble, Sid.
I mean, I'm just asking. It's just a question.
I'll say this, right? I agree with you because of this, right? For many years, we've seen teachers unions be anti-kid, anti-parent, right? And for me, that's enough to say, hey, if that's what you're going to continue to do, and we don't need to ask them because we've seen this, right? If that's what they do, that is what they do, well, then I would say we probably don't need teachers unions, right? My fight against the teachers union, my beef with them is around our children, right? So I understand the benefits, I understand the wages, but there's great charter school networks that aren't unionized and teachers have a great experience. More importantly, our children are learning how to read, right? So I think that, that's a tough question. It's a sticky one, but if they're going to continue to be blockers, to be barriers to our children's success, then I would say, yeah, right. We don't need another blocker. We don't need teachers unions in our elections, right? I just learned this a couple of weeks ago, and it's probably common across the USA, right? We're in a progressive state, and the teachers union runs everything, right? 20% of our elected DFL officials are endorsed by the union, former union members, some close connection to the union. The union bought and paid for their seat. I'll just say it like that, right? And that's something that I think is killing our children, right? Whether you take that literally or whether you think about, our babies' hopes and dreams, right? It's killing our children, and that needs to stop, right? If we don't have teachers unions endorsements in our school board elections, well, we actually will have our neighbors and parents on the school board, right? We won't have $100,000 spent on a school board race to get a slate of candidates elected who are meant to block everything positive, every reform for children.
Let me show you something here, because there's a few things for us to talk about, but let's set the scene for if someone is watching this somewhere else. They've heard from me. At times they hear from Nikema Levy-Pounds and Nikema Levy-Armstrong. They hear from you. I've been asked at times, what is going on with y'all in the Twin Cities? Some of y'all just sound so outrageous and so crazy, and it's not exactly what people would think is symbolic of what you would find in Minnesota, because you and I both know there's this thing called Minnesota nice. There is a stereotype of Minnesota as being this kind of this bastion of Humphrey-esque liberalism, where we're kind of a model state. Yeah, and this is the point. Like, when we put out a report earlier this year about progressive cities and progressive places that have these underbellies of education. What your show is called The Dark Side of Education. These are underbellies. We have these really nice, women with asymmetrical haircuts who hold their heart and say how much they love our children, while we are having this type of thing. Minnesota among worst achievement gaps in the states. And the thing about Minnesota that I have to keep hammering on so that people understand, if your state is like this too, because other states are like this. The thing about, being a state like ours that ranks high on the list for everything white. So if you're a white family, the standard of living in Minnesota is good for you. The number of jobs and careers and housing costs and all that stuff, the lakes, the rivers, the bike lanes, the cabin lifestyle and all of that, man, it's good for you. If you are white, you rank near the top. And if you are black or brown, our state ranks near the bottom. And why is that? Right? When we ask the question, why is that? We don't ever get really good answers. But this comes up every year. Rashad, you and I have seen this forever. These reports come out constantly. What is it that we're missing in being able to say to the power establishment here, we don't care how nice you are. We don't care, about your, how much you say you love our kids and how much you profess to care about us. These type of results are a problem with the system, not a problem with us.
Exactly. I'd say, Chris, and I hope folks from Minnesota are listening and watching this morning, right? We have a history in our activism community, in our communities, when it comes to education reform, of being super soft, right? We want to go ask if it's okay that our babies receive a quality education. And I think it's been that way in Minnesota for too long now. And one of the things that, since we've launched Minnesota Parent Union, right, we sort of look at this problem, look at all of the problems in education like this, right? You are with parents, you're in the way of parents, or you're going to stay out of the way, right? And those are three questions that we'll ask folks out in the community organizations, groups that aren't nonprofits. What are you here for, right? And in Minnesota, it's time for us to take things up several notches, right? Because Minnesota Nice, it affects us all, right? We all try to tiptoe around as if we need permission, right? We need to ask permission of the teachers union. We need to ask permission of, the Senate education chair or of these committee chairs. And it's like, no, what we need to do is something that they haven't seen before, right? We need to get a bunch of grassroots folks. And let me make mention this, right? Grassroots. It's not just poor Black families, poor Latinx families, right? Poor Native American families, right? Grassroots is all of us who are tired of this status quo, right? So we have to band together, but we have to be bold about it. We can't be tiptoeing, Chris. I mean, you know how it goes down up here in Minnesota. And I can't even count the number of times that I've been on a phone call or been out of town at a conference or a meeting, and they're clowning us in Minnesota, right? They say, oh, you all up in Minnesota. Well, yeah, you got worst in nation achievement gaps, and they're continuing to grow. What are y'all doing, right? And they'll say, well, you guys like to collaborate just for the sake of collaboration, right? You like to meet to talk about the next meeting. And that's
what people say here that drives me crazy. In Minnesota, we have people who are running for things who always say, we need to start a discussion about.
Right.
And they'll be like, we need to start a discussion about the achievement gap. And they'll say this as they're running for office. And you think, like, if you've been here for any amount of time, you're like, what do you mean start a discussion about? No, we don't need to have any more discussions about. What we need is some action. We need some changes. But you're right in that our advocacy community even, okay, let me just say, let me say a thing that won't get you in trouble, but, and won't get me in trouble. But I'm going to say, like, we don't give a damn about what I'm about to say because it's true. Everybody is bought off in this political system. So you said that we have elected officials who have their seats due to the teachers union, but the unionized industrial complex of Minnesota runs everything. They run, especially in the Twin Cities, they run the city council, they run the mayors, they run the governor, they run the commissioner of education, they run the politicians. We have a politician that I met, Black politician, one of our few elected Black politicians who has a kid in private school, who told me in a room full of Black parents and leaders in a private meeting, y'all ain't really even my constituency. The majority of people in my district aren't even Black, right? Told us exactly that when we came to him about school reform issues, even though his kid's in a private school, right? That is endemic here. Like, you have a tokenized system of Negroes who have been handpicked to be eunuchs, political eunuchs. We have a nonprofit industrial complex led by the same Negroes, right? They get a grant here or there. And if they don't do what the powers that be tell them to do, their grants get threatened. Philanthropy plays a role. The nonprofits play a role. The elected officials play a role. So what we have is basically a slave system to keep our kids in schools that parents don't want them in, to keep them in classrooms that aren't teaching them. Again, this is just me with the with my commentary. I don't know where you fall on what I just said.
This, right? I'll say this. We are looking for the runaway slaves then, right? We have to be those people. We have to go up against what might seem like the biggest monster we could ever have in our nightmares, right? Because you're absolutely right, Chris. If it's the Capitol, City Council, Mayor's office, they're running this thing. But when it comes to education, right, we as parents have the power because we sort of control where that money goes, right? And I've been talking to folks lately, with COVID and all that's been going on, families up here in Minnesota, it's like the governor's turned his back, their school leaders are turning their backs, and they're saying, well, what do we do? What should we do? And my response has started to be like, well, hey, we've been having this discussion, Chris, right? We've been having this discussion for years, decades. So I say, hey, these folks know what they're doing. They know what the problem is. And the only way they're going to learn is if we hit them in the pockets, right? Meaning we have to vote with our feet. Meaning and I'll give you this example right here, right? Here in Minneapolis, a school, Cedar Riverside Community School, low performing school, charter school, about 20-25% reading proficiency. They've been ignoring families for years, haven't given them a meeting, haven't replied to emails. Enter Minnesota Parent Union, enter our family advocates, Fatoon and Mustafa. They start working with the families, getting them organized. Families put the demands together and say, hey, school, hey, Pillsbury, the authorizer, you're going to do X, Y, Z, or we're going to leave your school. And the school replied, we got your email. Authorizer replied, we got your email. That wasn't enough for parents, right? That wasn't enough for those families. So that schools went from, let's say 123, it might have been 132, but now they're down to about 63 students. Now they're combining classrooms. They're firing their most ineffective teachers. Things are changing at that building. And I would say by the time this educational chaos is over with, that'd be a school that'd be closed because of parent power, right? That they chose to ignore families. That was working for a while. But now there's folks that have families' backs out here, and we're not playing games, right? So that will be a low-performing school that will close. And I'll say this on your show, Chris. I'm going to guarantee that our family advocates are so great that Cedar Riverside won't begin the school year. They'll start this fall 2020, but there won't be a fall 2021 for Cedar Riverside. That's how bold you got to be, right? And people aren't going to like, oh, well, they're trying to in schools. They're trying to, yeah. If 4 out of 5 kids can't read in your school building, it shouldn't be open. And that's the approach that we have to take. That's that bold approach I'm talking about, because in the past, it's been, oh, well, let's, put a Band-Aid on this gunshot wound here. And let's see how that works out. Oh, we got another gun. Oh, let's put another Band-Aid. But
what they will say, Rashad, they will say people like you and me are privatizers. We just want to ruin the public education system that has been so amazing and so great for everybody for generations. It's the cornerstone of democracy. It has made America what it is. It's made America great. We got to make education great again. We just got to put more money in it, because Lord knows we got to stop underfunding these pensions and these people's lifestyles who drive in from the suburbs to teach the Negroes every day. We got to give them more money, because they're the real victims of all this stuff that we're talking about. Like, who the hell is going to pay for those asymmetrical haircuts if we don't put more money into education? So people like you and me are really just like we're the enemy, man. We want to take money out of the schools, because the school, not the kids, not the parents, not the learning, not the achievement, not the outcomes. The school is what is important, because schools are starter prisons and pension farms. Exactly. So when you try to interrupt the flow of students, you're interrupting the flow of money. Why would you do that, Rashad? Why would you want to ruin that?
See, I think everything here in Minnesota, and it might be like this other places, but everything's focused on the system, right? It's focused on the adults in the building. And it's like, I don't care about a school building. I don't care about the adults in the building more than I care about our children in those school buildings, right? So it's a big shift for some folks to stop focusing on the system and start focusing on our children, right? And the whole privatization thing, you know, I don't even know. I mean, I don't get where people, especially, right? We hear that a lot from teachers unions, right? And from progressives. And Chris, you've mentioned this before. And so if they're going to talk about privatization, I think this is one of those times where you say, well, what about your pensions that are in private prisons, right? And I know you talk about that a lot. And that's something that, you know, one of the things I try not to get distracted with that, but I'm on your show, so I'm going to talk about it, right? But in real life, it would just be, you know, talk to the hand. We're going to keep it moving, right? And I'll say to folks, it's a narrative that is meant to distract, right? If we're, and a lot of people I talk to, when you're focused on people who are impacted by the disparities, Chris, they don't even know what the hell people are talking about when they're like, oh, we're trying to privatize. We actually explain it to them because it's like, hey, here are some of the things you're going to hear because you're associated with Minnesota Parent Union, right? So we give them the game on like, hey, you're going to hear about this. You know, we hate public schools. We don't like teachers. So we give them the game, but they're just like this, right? And I'm a parent, and you're a parent. We want our children in the best schools, right? Period. And some of us, we have the game to be able to make sure that happens and our kids get what they need. But a lot of the families that, you know, we work with, a lot of the parents, it's like they've gone through these systems, right? They've been treated a certain way, and their experience with the system, they understand that to be the same experience their kids are having. And once they really sort of tap into what's going on, into that power that they already have, right? For folks to say, oh, a Minnesota Parent Union, you know, you're empowering parents. It's like, I don't like that word, right? Because we all have that power inside of us, right? We sort of illuminate the path, if you will, right? So folks can see and tap into that power. But this is about our children getting a quality education, period.
I mean, and I want to be real about that power. When you say we all have that power as parents, depending on where you are on the class line, the social economic line, or whatever you want to call it, the SES, depends on how many people are, not depends on, will tell you how many people think you should have that power to exercise. A lot of the teachers union agenda is to stop a certain group of people from exercising choice, even after the teachers themselves have moved out of the city and moved to the suburbs. The teachers themselves, the majority of Twin Cities teachers live in the suburbs and have their kids in suburban schools, right? So they've already exercised their power, but what they want to do is stop the mom who isn't affluent or wealthy or even, you know, middle to middle upper class, or aligned with the right politicians or whatever, to stop that mom from exercising her power to be able to move out of the schools that the middle class works in. They don't want you going to a charter school. They don't want you having a choice, an option. They don't want you getting out of the schools they want you to be in, even as they have themselves abandoned those schools, right? Let us pass a residency rule that teachers have to live in the communities in which they teach, and we would have a different scenario right now.
And they'll tell us that, well, we don't have enough teachers then if we do something like that, right? That's BS.
We'll move into the city. We'll have enough if you move into the city.
Right.
Move back in.
And it's just like, you know, you mentioned LIFO at the top of the show, right? As one of sort of the ways that they control this thing, right? And I want folks to be aware, right here in Minnesota, just a couple of weeks ago, our Somali sister was a finalist for Teacher of the Year, was selected Teacher of the Year, and that same week, fired, right? Let go. Last in, first out, right? I'm looking at these comments over here. You don't get distracted with the comments over here, Chris.
I try to leave them alone because my folks be putting stuff into the comments.
Yeah. I be trying to look. When I do my show, I try to look, and for some reason, I feel like I can look at them more now. So I'm over here like, yeah. But no, the unions suck, man. Teachers' unions suck. They're white supremacists. What I think of when I hear teachers,
you say that now, a whole bunch of people are going. Did you say white supremacy? Like,
what's the first thing you think of when you hear teachers union, Chris? Because what I think of is this, right? Karen
in the classrooms, and people are gonna say this is a derisive term. There is nothing more derisive.
Oh, Chris, back up a second.
The way they talk about our parents.
Hold on, Chris. Yeah. I want to make sure you get this. Let me do this again, okay? Karen. Think about that.
Mm-hmm. America KKK.
There we go, citizen.
I caught it. See, this is gonna be that show that people are gonna be like, I can't believe you did that. I can't believe you said that. Whatever.
My coffee's kicked in, man.
I can't believe the things that they say about our children and our families when they think nobody is watching. They create a narrative of the broken down parent, of the kids that can't learn. They just need some food and a meal, and who cares about outcomes? Right now, in the middle of a pandemic, their entire agenda right now is to make sure that families don't get into alternative schools, into alternative learning situations, that they keep all the money, that parents don't get any of their money. I mean, Rashad, you know a little bit more than this than I do, but we have two people at the Federal Reserve, a former Minnesota Viking who's been a judge for years, a prominent Supreme Court judge for years, and a person from the Federal Reserve who have studied the achievement gap in Minnesota. And they are proposing just a 1 or 2 sentence change to the Constitution that creates a constitutional right for a quality education. And you would think that's something that everybody can be down with, right? A constitutional right.
I think so.
The teachers union, the state union have not known what to do with this, because this right gives parents the right to sue school districts for educational malpractice if it's not working out, right? And that would also give them the right to choose other options. It's a very simple language change, and they're fighting it. Tell me more, Rashad, about why it makes sense on their end to fight this.
I don't think it does. I don't think it makes any sense at all. And I think what they're going to run into, or what they're going to get ran over by, is a bunch of pissed off parents, bunch of pissed off community members who are going to ask them the question of, why are they okay with having worst in nation achievement gaps, right? Why are they okay with that? And if the teachers union has no answer for that, I don't think they're going to change the hearts and minds of parents out here or people in the community who believe in the Page Amendment, right? We call it the Page Amendment. Justice Page, he'll never call it that himself. He'll say the constitutional amendment, He ain't in his purple people eater days no more. But it's the Page Amendment, right? And it is a change to the language in our Constitution, which our Constitution currently reads, Chris, and it focuses on the system, right? We need an adequate and uniform system of schools. That's it. Adequate and uniform. And I'll tell you right now, in all 87 counties here in Minnesota, folks are realizing, because of this distance learning, that adequate and uniform, it hasn't been enough, and now it's not enough for everybody.
So right. let's be specific about it here too, because this is from the Star Tribune about the amendment. What you just said is the Page Amendment. It says the proposed amendment would guarantee that all children have a fundamental right to a quality public education that fully prepares them with the skills necessary for participation in the economy, our democracy, and society, as measured against uniform achievement standards set forth by the state. Right. It is a paramount duty of the state to ensure quality public schools that fulfill this fundamental right. There is nothing in that to me that sounds fight worthy. Like we should push back on that. 2 paragraphs later.
That's because you have a brain and you care about our children, Chris.
So here you go. Two paragraphs later, the state's major teachers union, Education Minnesota, opposes the change, saying it would pave the way for more lawsuits, i.e. more parents would sue for their rights. So that's a bad thing. Parents might sue for their rights, and more voucher programs. They might have access. And let's just be real. The proposal doesn't call for that. Nothing about it has anything to do with vouchers. But this shows you where their worry is. Their worry is that parents will exercise their power in the courts. And it shows you that they are worried that parents will exercise their right to take their per pupil income out of these pension farms that Education Minnesota wants to protect and defend. They privatize, like they're worried about, it privatizing, parents going to private schools. The union also argues that the change would remove the clear obligation of the legislature to fund public education and hold schools and educators responsible for outcomes beyond their control. They're worried that this will that having a constitutional right to an education will put teachers on the hook for things that are outside of their control. Things like bad parents, things like communities that don't support kids in their education or whatnot. They don't want to be on the hook. They don't want to be on the hook, and they don't want you to have options and have a right to go elsewhere.
Forever, the teachers unions have ran from any type of accountability, right? They say more money. We need more money. We need more money, right? But with this Page Amendment, let's start with the courts, Chris. Parents won't need to go to the courts if the folks at the Capitol do their jobs, right? If our legislature does their job, there won't be any need for the court. But if they don't, then you're right. Yeah, parents should be able to sue to make sure our kids are getting that quality education, right? Another thing I'll point out about the Page Amendment, it's not prescriptive. So you said, Chris, you didn't see anything that was like fight worthy in there. Well, you're absolutely right. And the union wants to talk about, privatization. You won't find private in the amendment. You won't find it in the Page Amendment. What you will find is public education, public schools, public about 5 or 6 times in the constitutional amendment, right? So it's another clear example of the teachers unions blocking what's best for children. They're anti-kids, they're anti-families. And the cool thing about this one, Chris, we went, Minnesota Parent Union, Federal Reserve, Justice Page, they were doing this tour around Minnesota, right? Getting this out here. And before they started this tour, I want to be clear on one thing. I want to make this point. Before they started the tour, before stuff really all the way got out there, what were they doing? Talking with community, listening with parents, listening with community members, not trying to do 2 or 4, but elevating what's in the Constitution to say, hey, is this enough, right? Adequate and uniform's not enough. The Page Amendment isn't prescriptive. And I want to be clear also in saying it's not the end all be all. Right? It's not the magic bullet, the silver bullet.
It's not even radical, really.
It's not.
It's not even radical. So if you can't even do lukewarm things, like say, hey guys, maybe we should have a constitutional right to like a quality education. What do you think? That doesn't even sound like radical. That sounds kind of stupid to have to say in the year 2020. To me, it just sounds a little stupid to be able to have to say that. In Detroit, there was a case that gave you a constitutional right to literacy. And in a lot of places, teachers are against that. In California, the Vergara case was trying to give you a right to a good teacher, a teacher who was assigned to you on merit, not on time in the classroom. And teachers fought that. Here in Minnesota, we had a case that was also trying to end the last in, first out, that has released 2 Black Teachers of the Year. They were against that. They were against like even, something as unfair as LIFO. So, of course, everything we say is going to sound radical, and you're more radical than I am. So everything you're going to say is going to sound twice as radical as anything I'm going to say. But do you think it hurts us that idea that they can paint us as radicals, and then that way the political establishment will have an out. They won't have to listen to folks that they consider to be too radical, too out there.
So here's what I'll say without giving away any secret sauce, right? We know where the unions are at. We know what they say, right? But we only know that, Chris, because, we're a part of these sort of grass top spaces, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm sitting downtown Minneapolis on the 45th floor somewhere, and, they're asking me about these narratives, right? I remind them, like, these are 45th floor narratives. The mom and dad at Cub up in the Midway here in St. Paul, you ask them, well, should our kids have an individual right to quality education? They're going to say, well, we thought they already did.
Right.
So like, for me, with something like the Page Amendment, this is going to be, I think, the first example where the grassroots and the parents get this thing done, right? I was in a meeting last week, Chris, and we got some sharp people up here, strategists, lobbyists, all of these experts who know what they're doing, right? And I just watched a presentation last week, and it reminded me of something, right? The teachers union ain't nothing. It's all about the power of parents. Are we going to step up as parents, as communities, and get this Page Amendment on the ballot? The presentation I seen made me feel like it's all on us, right? So it's one of those things that we know they're going to be blockers, but that narrative that they try to spew, the folks down at Tabasi, the corner store, none of them have heard it.
Well, so let me ask you about this parent. When we talk about parents, sometimes it sounds like we're talking about a single group of people, like parents. In Minnesota, what we know is the white parents of Minnesota who are very well served by the public education system because it actually is built for them, and whatever they ask for, they get. Like, so when we know in Minneapolis for sure, and in St. Paul for sure, when white parents make a stink about something, they get heard. Policies get changed. Elected officials from other jurisdictions call the school board and tell them, what they're going to do. And they tell superintendents what they're going to do, or else there will be repercussions. Thing about Minnesota that might be different. I don't know, wherever anybody's listening from, this might be different where you are, but we are a very white state. So when our white leadership talks to white parents, they make sure they take care of them. So if there's any beef with us, with our parents, they have a lot of the public on their side, right? So when it comes to policy and politicians or whatnot, all you have to do is go love up the white parents, and you've got the table, right? How do you think we overcome the idea that not all parents are created equal in Minnesota? Possibly elsewhere, but definitely in Minnesota, all parents are not created equal.
I think that we just punch them right in the mouth, right? Not literally. We just have to bring it like that, right? I mean, we have to understand that, the parents who are marginalized, the parents who are ignored, need us to step up, right? They need us to stand alongside them, just like those white parents show up, right? And when they show up, they've got their support systems standing alongside them, right? So I think it just goes back to the bold approach, because I know that we aren't all seen as equals, right? But it reminds me of this verse or this line from a Nipsey Hussle song where he says, there's some stuff they're going to think and there's some stuff they're going to say, right? And I think that that's something that, we have to think about. What it makes me think about is this: the same folks who are saying no to every single meaningful reform, they call for moratoriums on charter schools, they're anti-school choice, those same folks are scared of us. And it's like, we have to understand our power, right? Whether we're talking about Black parents, parents of color in general, it's like, we have to understand our power, and we have to approach this thing in a bold way because we already know they're scared, right? And these people are the same people. You're walking in a store, that old white lady or that white lady, she pulls her purse close. I don't know if that happens to you or not, Chris, but you're nice. You look nice. You look like a nice guy. But
that's right. They don't do that to me. I don't know what's wrong with y'all. It's your fault, man.
It's those type of people. You know what I mean? And I know some of my friends, they say, "Oh, Rashad, you use such militarized language," but I understand that, y'all. But it's like we have to attack this system in the same way and go even harder than they've been attacking and going at us, right? When I know there are schools in my neighborhood where 4 out of 5 kids can't read, I wake up pissed off every day.
Well, and let's just be real about what that is. So if you have an elected official who doesn't see that as an immediate, urgent crisis, not just a problem, but a crisis, now you know that like your level of radicalism has to be equal to the level of the problem.
Yeah.
And if you believe that the problem is not that big, then you're less radical. Exactly. You're more like, if you've gotten your kid, if you're one of the legislators, one of our handful of Black legislators who's got your kid in a private school, then your level of radicalism can be down here because you're going to keep getting elected and getting fed, and you ain't missing any meals. Let's just be real about this. Everybody knows that. That's just visible. Anyways, and then you could be another elected official who's sending your kid outside of the city to a suburban school to get away from your local school. So now you don't have to be as radical anymore. You could be a congressperson who's had your kid in private schools and charter schools and everything else, who doesn't support choice because you're comfortable, right? I want to show just something to give people a visual, because I think visuals matter, and give people kind of a good idea what we're talking about a little bit here. Just what I'm talking about. I don't know if this is what you're talking about, but like if you look at Minnesota, first of all, this is our commissioner of education right here, right? Mary Catherine Ricker is our commissioner of education. She was Randy Weingarten's number 2. She happens to be one of the nicest people that I've ever met. And when you think of Minnesota nice and you look it up, this is like a better picture right here. This right here is a better picture. The hand on the chest, just the nice kind of expressions. She's one of the nicest people you'll ever meet in person, who couldn't be more disastrous when it comes to the type of policies that she will fight on behalf of the unions. She was Randy Weingarten's number 2. Our state teachers union president, this is her. This is Denise Speck, classroom teacher. Again, very nice person in public, but in private is trying to kill the opportunities for Black families to go to charter schools, have any choices, is against this amendment that offers a quality education, because she doesn't want good white teachers like her to be on the hook for teaching the savages and having outcomes, right? My language, not hers, so don't come at me. Well, come at me if you want to. You ain't gonna win. So this is our governor, former classroom teacher, him and Mary Catherine and Denise. This is a triad of the power base of education in Minnesota. This is who's in control of Native American education and Black education and Latino education and Somali education. This triad. This is Jim Dabney, classroom teacher, one of the biggest kind of supporters of education policy in our legislature, who has a lot of the education brain within our legislature, our state legislature, and him and Mary Catherine and Denise and Waltz or whatnot. This is the power base of who is like deciding what we get to do with our kids. We don't have a chance in hell if we are anything less than radical from being heard, because they have the political system locked up and they have us locked out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and if you were to, follow the money, follow the donations to a Jim Dabney or to a Walls, you see a lot of teachers union money in there. And the interesting thing is, here in Minnesota, it's like, I know the unions are bad in other places, but here in Minnesota, it's just, it's horrific what they're doing to our children, right? And you showed a few of the white people, but it's like 94% white people in our teachers union, right? 94%.
Damn, that's gonna be higher than Finland.
Right.
Shit. That's gonna be higher than a Dave Matthews concert. God damn, what? 94%.
Yeah, 94% white.
I did not know it was that.
It's worse here in Minnesota because, going back to the Page Amendment, right?
Mm-hmm.
National Educators Association, or NEA, right? If you were to look at NEA's website, go through some of their stuff, NEA is for our children having a right to quality education, right? So it's like here in Minnesota, and I see your comment, Jesse. We called in teaching. Jesse said they call them Sue, not Karen. So I'm gonna add the Sue to the repertoire. But it's like in Minnesota, it's bad. I mean, it's super bad. And just imagine, right? One of the things folks say is like, well, Rashad, that parent union, that's a good idea. Right? And I respond to them with a thanks, but I also say, well, what the hell have y'all been doing all of this time? Right? Because going back to that nonprofit industrial complex that you mentioned earlier, Chris, Minnesota Parent Union, we don't want to be a part of that. Right? And we understand exactly what you said. You have to meet this educational chaos, this crisis that we've been in, where the gaps are continuing to widen. You have to have a radical response to it. You have to have a radical approach to it. And, you look back through history, and radicals don't always make it for long, right? But this radical approach that we have means we are planting the seeds, building chapters all around the state, right? Pretty soon, Jim Dabney's going to have to do what the constituents he's been ignoring for a long time tell him to do.
So this is what's going to happen. And, like you and I can always have real talk. So we could just talk for real, because I don't know if anybody anywhere else, if this is going to matter to what goes on in your local politics. But what's going to happen here in Minnesota is the Minnesota Parents Union is going to start organizing parents who have been marginalized to have power, because that's all we care about.
All we care.
Nothing else we're talking about is anything other than power. That's all. Like, let's just be clear on what our objective and goal is. And once you start organizing marginalized parents to do that, what's going to happen is groups like Isaiah, who has 90-something congregations that they organize that work directly with the unions and are paid by the same people that the unions pay, are going to organize white churches across the state and find a handful of Negro churches to stand with them against anything that looks like it's going against what the teachers union wants. That's just the way we roll here. Take Action Minnesota is going to push back on it too. They get paid by the exact same people. The Ford Foundation is probably going to send money to those two groups to erect another front group of color, which is what they've done in the past. They did it with Knock, and they'll do it again, to fight anything that looks like it's rebellious or radical or not what the power base of the teachers union wants. There you go. Philanthropy, the nonprofit industrial complex, and the people that I've just showed you pictures of, and their politicians that they hire. That's how they get us every single time, right?
But this time, we're going to crush them, right? We're going to crush them because of this, right? They're not going into the neighborhoods we're going into, right? They're picking their puppets. They're paying to play with the politicians. We're going straight to the hood, right? That's where you find us. Deep in the north side, deep on the south side, Frogtown, wherever we need to be to truly meet families where they're at, that's where we will be. And we're going to crush these people, right? The gap's not going to close overnight, but Minnesota's not going to be known for tiptoeing anymore. Right?
What are you going to do when they do that thing that they do where they go to the hood and they find the village idiot? And this is, listen, I'm always going to talk straight with people. Every community has its village idiots, and the union will find every one of them and run them for school board. Every single one of them. And they will come up there talking about, we don't need no more choices. The plantation's just fine. We don't need any options. Massa said we got it good. So blah, blah, blah. They will really hate me for terming things the way that I term them, but I'm 2 decades into frustration. I'm 2 decades in of this, right? And what we know is when they can't fight you with the good white parent or the Mary Catherine Rick or whatnot, they will go find each one of your village idiots, give them a $7 to $15 an hour job to either run for school board or organize people to come and say, we don't want any choices. We don't want any options, right? What are you going to do about the village idiot problem?
I'll say that village idiot is a village idiot for a reason, right? So we expose the village idiots. Again, it's three. You got three options. You're with parents, you're in the way of parents, or you're going to stay out the way. Those are your three options. Those don't change, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe some folks watching remember the movie State Property. And you remember Beans when he said at that part, it's get down or lay down. That's folks' options, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the gap continues to grow and people talk about the gap, but I think some of them forget in that gap are our children, right? Are our babies, actual human beings who are capable, much more capable than what this system treats them like.
How they treat them.
It's get down or lay down, right? It's going to be radical. It's going to be bold. I'll tell you this, Chris, the support from not just our funding partners, but the support from folks who want to make things change in education has been outstanding. I'm talking about that. Yes, they're opening up their checkbooks, right? And they're making those contributions. They're being the partners in that way. But these folks are ready to organize, right? I had a meeting a few weeks ago where a local college president, they said to me, and we were talking about knocking the teachers union down a few notches. I got a whole briefing over here we've been working on. But that person said, when you get that done, I want to be at the meeting because I want to help organize my network of people so they can support what parents and families want, right? I guarantee you, Chris, that the organizing that is happening now hasn't been like this before around education. We've seen it with criminal justice, right?
Yeah, I agree.
We see it with criminal justice because those murders are all over the TV, 24/7 news cycle, right? What we're seeing right now with education is folks who have been pushed to the side, folks who've been ignored, starting to wake up, right? Starting to understand that, well, damn, my sixth grader is reading at a third grade level. That's a problem, right? And
but Rashad, that sixth grader is reading at a third grade level because they're hungry. Yeah. And because they don't have good parents, and because
we were slaves, we were enslaved and learned how to read, man. You know what I'm saying? So it's like the poverty pimps out there who say, "Oh, well, we gotta end poverty," right? It's not gonna happen.
Not anytime soon.
This system. Well, I mean, we have to change our whole structure to end poverty. This system, capitalism, relies on poverty.
Yeah. I've made this analogy before. Hennepin County Hospital in downtown Minneapolis is a national expert in gunshot wounds. So if you get shot anywhere or having a heart attack, that's the actual hospital where you want to go. They could have for years said, you got to stop bringing us all these people who get shot. You got to stop bringing us people who are poor. You got to stop bringing us people who live lifestyles that get them shot. But at some point, they're like, no matter where they come from, whatnot, we got to get good at gunshot wounds. And so now, if you get shot in the suburbs, you want to get transferred into the city, to the emergency room in the city, because that's where you're going to get the best care, because they didn't sit around saying, send us better patients. Send us better patients and we'll have better outcomes. No, they said we're gonna have a lot of gunshots, so we're gonna need to figure out how we handle those. Oh, by the way, we're also gonna have a lot of heart attacks. But we're not gonna sit around saying people need to change their diets as our strategy for helping them once they're sick, right? Same with teachers.
They take that approach. We can't teach them until we fix them.
Right? And fix their families and their communities. You did a show recently, and I just wanted to jump on this quick because I know we're gonna wrap soon. But you did a Follow the Money show. Recently, and you were talking about like how much we spend a ton in Minnesota on education. I think our budget for education is 40% health and human services, 40% education or more. Our per pupil income is higher than a lot of places that are cleaning our clock in terms of outcomes. For sure. You laid this all out in your show on Sunday. And it's been that way for years. I want to like put up on the screen this thing that just kills me every time I go back to it and see it. Our unions and others will tell us it's just about money. We just need more money, right? And if we always talk about the input of money and not talk about the output, like once the money gets there, who gets the money? If we raise the budget by $100 million, does that get to the kid? Does that get to Jerome? Does Jerome all of a sudden get something better in his classroom? No, because we're spending like 30% of our that money on legacy debt and on benefits for employees who already have their college degrees, who are already college educated. But this story from, when was this? This was last summer, not this summer, but last summer. $600 million a year. This was aimed specifically at helping kids close the achievement gap, helping kids that were struggling do better, right?
Basic skills funds. Yeah.
And they couldn't figure out where it was going. State auditor looked at this money.
Yeah.
You're not tracking, just like in schools were using it for all kinds of wacky stuff. $600 million a year that was supposed to be like laser focused on achievement for kids that were struggling. And the state auditor basically said it's tricky to track where the aid of the school is going and whether it's working. So all we need is more money. Rashad, you're going to encounter that as the narrative constantly. Like, all we need is money. What are you going to do about that? This is all on you. I'm putting it all on you. So what are you going to do about that narrative?
Consider them bowling pins, those narratives and those people. We're going to stand at the opposite end of the lane with our bowling balls, right? And we're going to knock their asses over, Chris. I mean, it's period. We don't care what their narratives are. The proof is out there, right? They can hide the data all they want. That's what they've been doing. But I seen Christina in here. She said the great parent awakening, right? Mm-hmm. That's what's happening right now. Mm-hmm. Distance learning has impacted us all, whether it's Johnny the mechanic, whether it's Shaniqua up the street, whoever, we've all been impacted. The time is now, right? My sister Nakima would say it all the time. The time is now. And that's what we're doing. Mm-hmm. Onward. We don't care about their narratives. We don't care about their front groups or, and I don't even know, when those churches come together and they organize against parents, I have to ask them, which God do they believe in? Oof. Because the God I believe in is a God of justice. And we know that looking at these numbers, looking at the data, decade after decade, Black children, Latine children, Native American children, we've been at the bottom. Hmong children, right? Mm-hmm. If it ain't white, it ain't right. That's how it operates here in Minnesota. It's time to change that. We will change education here in Minnesota. Not just Minnesota Parent Union, right? But all of the folks with us, right? This is about our members, parents, students. This is about folks at the grass top, our funding partners continuing to be radical because they care about our children. The great parent awakening, as Christina said, that's what's going to happen. Narratives don't matter. White supremacy of the union doesn't matter. You can call them Sue, you call them Karen, whatever. We're going to run them all over. And you're recording this, so folks are going to be able to come back and check with me next year, right? Mm-hmm. Check with me next year to see if Cedar Riverside, which is a charter school, by the way, is still operating. It won't be, right? In the next year or two, starting now, hopefully next session, the Page Amendment, we'll get it on the ballot. Don't worry, right? And I can only guarantee these things because I know all of the pissed off parents out there, all of the pissed off community members are tired. They just needed somebody to kick the door down, right? And consider Minnesota Parent Union a door kicker, right? The approach to beating the bully is not to just keep giving them your lunch money, right? You have to do something.
I love it. This has been an hour and more with Rashad Turner, founder and executive director of the Minnesota Parents Union. You've seen him. I appreciate you, man. Like, I've always appreciated you, and we're gonna keep. We've been working on this together for years. We're gonna keep on working until we have justice for our kids. I hope people reach out to you. Rashad's Twitter handle has been going across the bottom there. Christina Laster, actually, all of our commenters today actually have added rich comments. It's always hard to read them as we're going, but I'll read them when we get off. Christine Laster put up Isaiah 61 is I the Lord love justice and hate robbery, says that to my brother. Which God do you believe in? Right. And you just said that, Rashad. We have lots of local folks who like to talk about justice and social justice and get grants based upon their talk around social justice. And they are part of the oppressive system that locks parents out of educational opportunity and locks them into permanent residence in these pension farms, these starter prisons, and these places of ill repute when it comes to educational outcomes.
Sure.
Our goal is to stop being part of the mannerable system that requires us to lower our voice and have coffee and hotel convention conversations about how we need to do something, and starts doing what Rashad said, which is kicking that door down. And we need to do it not because we just want to be radical for radical's sake. We need to do it because our kids can learn, and they're not learning. And there are material consequences to our kids not learning to read, our kids not learning to be numerate, our kids not learning to write, our kids not learning anything about science. For us graduating one population year after year of people who are not capable of thriving in the mainstream, that's on us. That's our sin. And I like Rashad because Rashad's one of the few people I know in a state like Minnesota where you are rewarded for being milquetoast. You are rewarded for being lukewarm.
Yeah.
If you want to make it in business without really trying in Minnesota, be as lukewarm, milquetoast as you can possibly be as Negro-pean as you can possibly be, and you will actually rise to the top like cream, like black cream in Minnesota.
Quickly.
And you will be completely useless to your people.
Exactly.
You'll be completely useless. You will be like the domesticated house cat. And we know where the house is. And we know who you are. We know how you got elected. We know who you're serving. To the village idiots, I just want to say, I don't get a lot of opportunity to talk to my people here in Minnesota in this way. To the village idiots who will have coffee with a union organizer on one day and have them write you a little check the next day and then jump out here and say that our families don't need options or choices or whatnot. For those of you who are so stupid to not know when they're running you for school board and giving you your agenda and your talking points and you're just sucking it down like the idiot that you are and the sellout, you have to go too.
Yeah.
We can't just keep calling out white people when we have black politicians and black village idiots and brown village idiots who sound no different than the oppressive educational regime. This has been another hour. That's my commentary at the end of this show. You obviously, if you're listening to this, know it's coming from a place of frustration. I'm a couple of decades in at looking at this problem locally. I'm glad to see you come along, Rashad, and do something about it, because some of us burn out on the level of hypocrisy and oppression that we have here locally. So keep doing what you're doing, man.
Hey, we appreciate you, citizen. We appreciate you.
All right. Well,
I will see you on your show next week.
Look at you getting around to all the shows.
You got my Twitter on there. I don't even really like Twitter, but if you want to interact, go on Facebook, Rashad Anthony Turner. I don't like Twitter. Twitter's, I'll leave it alone. But
I'll take care of Twitter. You take care of Facebook.
Yes.
All right, y'all.